think so. Actually, today is like a particular. I think there's a particular mix that's going on in the world. So today is in the Ifa tradition, and Sheshe tradition, is Ifa Day, but it's also Itado Gum, which is a particular Ifa Day. So that's a more special Ifa Day. Then on top of that, you got it's Good Friday. So you got the like you said, the Holy Week for this whole week. And you got Passover that started on Wednesday.
Yeah, it
and
started Wednesday night. Yep. And it's Ramadan,
It's fire week. Everything on fire.
And then you see everything popping off over, in the occupied territory. So, which I'd never understand, like how you can take this holy land and then it end up being so much conflict.
You never understand. Never mind. Let me
make it unholy.
you don't understand how that happens.
I mean, I think the human frailty of religion and everybody thinking that they're right and doing a whole bunch of wrong, and thinking that they're right. So, So I was watching how the Israelis went into the mosque. I don't know, Estee, you may know what the name of the mosque was that they went into.
I don't know the specific name of the mosque, but I'm
which one?
Yeah, the story.
So there was one. I mean, there's a whole coverage on Al Jazeera. So it's a mosque that is sacred to Jewish people, and it's sacred to the Muslims. And so the Israelis went in and they were beating people, as they were praying, and it was a whole. So then Lebanon, then there's rockets going from Lebanon into. It was just like a whole thing, and now the Israelis are launching rockets back. So I mean, it's
a mess.
Popping.
It's a mess. Yeah.
And all over religion, Yeah. So I feel like Reverend Estee, you need to pray for us. That's an interdenominational prayer.
Bust it out.
Interfaith.
Interfaith. Thank you.
Right.
Interfaith prayer.
Listen.
But how y'all doing?
It's crazy. I'm good. I have been feeling all the feels. So the week has been rough, especially with the foolishness happening in the country. So yeah, I've been in my feelings a little bit, but I'm good.
Okay, so this has nothing to do with our topic today, but I'm wondering, just from your perspective as a faith leader, how does one retain their faith? No. Hey, let me talk specifically. I ain't asking for a friend. I'm talking about for me. Seeing everything that's going on in the world right now, seeing what happened in Tennessee, where you got the two Black representatives that get expelled from the state legislature while the white woman gets to stay in, seeing all the evil that's going around the world, evil that is being promoted as though it is justice, and when it is really injustice, seeing what's going on and to the Palestinians and what is happening between the Palestinians and the Israelis and Hezbollah. How do I maintain my faith, honey?
So I feel like my answer is probably not a sufficient answer globally, but I can tell you what works for me. My great grandmother Nena was born a slave in Twiggs County, Georgia. And she worked her whole life to get 12 acres of land, period. And for me, reconnecting and reminding myself of how I got here, of what it took to get me here, of the privilege that I have to sit in the house that I sit in, to worry about the things that I worry about, to be concerned about, you know what I mean? The privileges that I have. When I remember Nina Henson Dillard Reese, it brings me back to the ground, because for me, that reminds me that worse has been true. And worse has been the lived reality for the very people that willed and wailed so that I could exist.
Sure.
It doesn't make it perfect, but I know that she was able to live free because Ethel Babe Parker, right? Go back 2 more generations. And these are all my namesakes. So that's why I say this is my personal thing. But you know, what lived a slave and was the master's was the object of the master's rape. And so for people that live that reality, and I carry their DNA, it just reminds me that there's something else on the other side.
I love that.
Yeah. And it doesn't make it perfect. My life isn't perfect, but my ancestors could not conceive of what is my reality. And as frustrated as I can get, I literally was dealing with some personal business stuff this morning, upset about $1,000, right? Which is huge money to me in my reality, in my context, working for myself, right? Like it's a big deal. It's a huge deal in my life that pays a whole lot of bills, that takes care of a whole lot. That's a whole lot of groceries, right? But my grandmother has told me stories about not being able to have 10 cents for the milkman.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that bombing and all of that is not a big deal. It doesn't mean that what's happening across the water is not a big deal. But I just believe that the work that we do goes somewhere and somebody comes behind us and that they will get, even if just a little more, they'll get more than we had. Because I have more than my folks got because they fought for it. And they didn't do it alone. I believe spirit was in that.
I like that. Yeah. Part of what I thought this morning, I mean, I do remind myself of that. And I was thinking this morning, as this is like Good Friday, and even though I'm not a Christian, I love the story, the resurrection story of Jesus the Christ. And so just thinking about this time of when the state executed him.
And I think that's a good point to make, right? Because Good Friday is really about grief. It's about death. You know what I mean? Like Good Friday, when I was in seminary, they would tell us if you preach a resurrection on Friday, you missed the point and you've done a bad job. You fail. You fail, right? Because a lot of churches gather. My pastor is preaching tonight. I have, my church is going to be a part of it. Many churches gather on Good Friday to commemorate the actual day of death. But that really is about this kind of collective remembering of state-sanctioned violence against a Black man who, has become an exemplar in our tradition. But he was a Black man doing revolutionary work, turning over tables when folks were getting manipulated financially. Right. So there's a very real reality and there's a real reason why Caesar took him to the cross. And we have that narrative across our traditions.
Sure.
We have that narrative across our traditions. And so today is the day to be mad as hell, to be angry, to name what's fucked up. And when it costs us our lives and when we have to bleed over it, and to choose to sit in that and to hold that and to be with that, even as we do anticipate that there are things that we can resurrect and use our spiritual power to bring something else into the material and physical world.
I mean, I thought about that just with those two Tennessee representatives, like even though this represents a death right now of their career, there's something that happens on the other end of that. There's a state sanctioned death of their career right now. But then I got up this morning And I ain't never donated to nobody's campaign in Tennessee. But this morning,
you was like, let me find $5.
and where I got that idea, because it never crossed my mind to actually donate to people in other states. Now, my aunt, who would not call herself no revolutionary, there's misrespectability politics. She's revolutionary with her wallet. And so she was telling me when Stacey Abrams was running, she was like, yeah, I sent some money for her. And then she sent some money, and she sends money to other states. And when she said that, I was like, oh, it never crossed my mind that you can donate to somebody in a different state.
Mm-hmm.
She's doing this all the way from California.
Stacey Abrams, who has been appointed to a position at Howard. Y'all heard about that?
Yeah. But I got that from my aunt, who would not call herself a revolutionary, but does that one revolutionary act. So.
Yeah, I just want these white folks to come up with some better tricks, with some new ones.
That when you let me tell you this from and then we're gonna get on to our topic for today. Let me tell you from a psychological perspective. When you
please,
folks that are antisocial, Tani wants us to have this conversation. We're gonna put this on topic one day. But when you're thinking of like antisocial personality disorder, folks with antisocial personality disorder don't have a lot of tricks. They do the same thing over and over again. They lie.
I was gonna say, if the old tricks working, why they need new tricks? It's working for them.
You're not dealing with someone who is spiritually full. So in order for you to come up with new tricks, you gotta be in prayer. You gotta be in communion with the ancestors, with God, with your Ori. No, if you're just a criminal, you're just a criminal. That's all there is, honey.
I guess I just feel like new tricks will be better tricks. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you came up with a new trick and not taking us back to, when was the last time this happened? I think it was like 1856 or something. If you weren't taking us back a century, then maybe we could even, feign some respect, or like.
But why does that need to happen? So if you engage in antisocial behavior, just think about this from a psychological perspective. You engage in antisocial behavior, you benefit financially, you benefit socially, you benefit politically from that antisocial behavior. There's no negative consequence. You're not going to change.
Why change?
Nobody changes their behavior. Even like, take it out of the antisocial kind of thing of the antisocial and racist thing that happened in Tennessee. Right. But all of us, we don't change our behavior until there's enough pain in doing what it is that we're doing
that we have to change.
That we
do something different.
Sure.
We don't change. Like we'll be eating, fried chicken and sweet tea and all that other kind of stuff. And we keep doing it over and over.
Well, not the tea.
Yeah,
not the tea.
Okay.
But
whatever our carbs are, whatever our things are, we keep doing that over and over and over again, even though we know it is bad for us.
Yeah.
And we're not going to change until there's enough pain. And so as a psychologist, what we used to do is, so this is the answer to the question, honey, is what we talk about as psychologists is how do we help our clients turn up the pain?
Bring the pain.
Turn it up.
Turn up the pain. So kind of for an example, just using that example, let's use the food example that I was just saying. I mean, talking to a client and, them feeling stuck in this pattern of, I can't stop. The carbs are just, the carbs make you feel good. And I can't stop doing that behavior. But then let's shift and let's talk about the pain. So talking to a sister and I was just like, you've gained 50, 60 pounds in a year. You've had to have been sick doing that. That's a lot of food to eat. So then we start talking about what is the cost to be there to help her turn up the pain. So it's not going to necessarily change overnight, but at least for a minute, she can think about, do I really want to be sick right now?
Or in the future, yeah.
Or in the future. We were at the Cheesecake Factory the other day. Now, you know I love me some Cheesecake Factory. And my girlfriend was about to buy. She was paying. I looked in the little case trying to figure out what I was going to do. But then for me, so that part is really good. Just thinking about the potential. And every time I buy a cheesecake, it's going to last. I'm going to have 3 servings out of it because it's so rich. I can't eat that much. I'm going to get 3 times. I'm going to be able to eat off the cheesecake. Right. I thought about all of that. But then I also thought about what the consequence, the pain. And in that moment, I decided I didn't want that pain. So I left the cheesecake there. But that one moment. Now, next week I might go, it might be something different. So going back to the question of, so why don't they do new tricks? They ain't got no pain. No pain. They're benefiting from everything that they're doing right now. Every single time that they say something racist and do something racist, they get more money, they get more prestige. The more antisocial, the more psychopathic their behavior is, the more benefit they get. There is no pain. Hey, Nozibele. Hey, Karen.
Hey.
Hey, y'all. Hey, I come in on the Cheesecake Factory debates. And I apologize for my lighting. I just realized I blew something out, and I was like, I can't see anything but the shine on my forehead. But y'all, not trying to be stereotypical that all you see is a smile, but you know.
Where the watermelon at?
So hey everyone, that was our
right here. It's right here.
What'd you say? What'd you say,
Nozibele?
I said it's right here. I can pull some out.
We gonna shift. We were talking about why people keep this negative behaviors, but we're going to shift because we were supposed to be talking about the principles of pleasure, which is the Netflix series that we watched, or some of us watched, or most of us. So I'm Dr. Ifetayo Ojelade. Today I am joined with journalist and social commentator Thandisizwe Chimurenga, who is in Los Angeles. She's based over there in Los Angeles, which is the Tongva territory. And then below me is Nozibele, Waithe, Antoinette, Kaumba, the 50 million names. She is an anthropologist. She's also a professor, and she is the owner of Grand Tressa Natural Hair Products. And then Reverend Estee, Nena, Dillard, Okunsade, who is an Olokun priestess, and then she is an Ifa priest and a Gungun priest. And a reverend. And, she's a queer sexologist, and so she's going to help us lead this discussion today on this topic, which I am excited about. I don't know about any of y'all. So thank you for coming, ladies, and having this conversation with me. And I kind of wanted to start out and just ask, and I got the queer sexologist and the anthropologist here, so I kind of know what y'all gonna say. How comfortable were you with just the material in and of itself? And just the idea of talking about, because this whole thing of the principles of pleasure is talking about women's pleasure and sexuality. And so how comfortable were you with just the topic overall?
Actually, can I go first? Sure. Only because it was 3 episodes and I got to 1.5. So let me get my little madness out the way. Anyway, okay. So let me just say that I greatly appreciated seeing big bodies represented and talking about big bodies and pleasure. And my heart sang when I saw Erica Hart available, because I think she does amazing work around pleasure, around sexual education, sexual health education, and she's so pleasant because she continuously reminds us of white supremacy's place and space in all of this. And even though we're talking about pleasure, we have we're not gonna gloss over the fact that there's a taint there because of white supremacy, and that we have to remember what that has meant for our bodies, what that has meant for pleasure, what that has meant for Black women. So I was appreciative of seeing her there, of seeing the sisters there who were a representative of different sizes. But other than that, after that first episode, I was like, okay, I'm good. I'm good. I don't need no more.
Okay, which one was Erica? I didn't get their names. Which one was Erica?
Eric, well, that's interesting. Okay, Eric. So
Erica was the one who talked about. I don't know. I didn't retain everybody's names either. I just am familiar with her work, and I remember
her. I don't remember other names either.
I remember her talking about cancer and
okay, disease. So that's the sister,
the Black one.
There were two sex educators. One
had blonde hair, sister with a little, and then the other sister.
Okay, and then no, I loved both of them. Okay,
yeah, Erica she's a breast cancer survivor. That's actually how she first came into my consciousness, because she would walk around Afropunk, which, if you're familiar with Afropunk, anyway, she would walk around Afropunk and she fit in because she would walk around topless, and her nipples had been removed. She still had breasts but no nipples, and she's like, "We need to talk about this." As you're staring at my chest, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the fact. So that's how she first came by. I was like, "Who is this sister?" But she would always maintain the sexual educator hat, and I was like, "Okay." And to see her present, she's clothed, by the way. If you haven't seen this Netflix,
she is clothed.
She is wearing clothing. She's not topless, but she's just so on it in terms of our. And one of the narrators was talking about our right to pleasure. We deserve it. We should have it. There's nothing wrong with it. This is how you access it. But also, we can't act like white supremacy has not affected us, is not currently affecting us, and something needs to be done about it. So I appreciated that.
Fair enough. But how comfortable you got to still answer my question though. How comfortable were you with the series, and then even just the idea of when Estee is like, let's have this conversation?
I'm comfortable with it, but in terms of that series, it's like after a while, my thing when it comes to sexuality, when it comes to porn, across that spectrum for me, my position is black coffee, no sugar, no cream. I'm not trying to see or hear about other folks. I just, after a while, I was like, okay, I'm good. Let me go see what else. Let me go watch Snowfall. Yeah. Let me go see some bullets. Let me go see some drugs and bullets and guns. No, I'm just playing. No, but seriously, after a while, I'm like, okay, thank you. I get it now. I get it. Thank you. I'm glad I saw Erica. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get the other sister's name with the little blonde. But other than that, I'm like, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, you go sit in the corner. Go sit in the corner.
Tiny's in timeout.
Now, see, why you gonna penalize me for sharing? That's why I got trust issues. But all right,
you was good until you said bullets and guns. You in timeout for that.
Woo! I got an Ogun lineage thing going on. All right, go ahead.
I think maybe I'll do it for Estee, because I know Estee probably would have a more detailed analysis of it, being a sexologist.
Yeah.
Three girls and running rites of passage programs for a long time. I am very comfortable with discussing sex, sexuality, pleasure, types of things. So I really appreciated this series, and it's funny because all throughout the series, you know what I kept in my head?
What?
Pleasure Principle.
Janet Jackson. Yeah.
A pleasure. You may think that's my thing, girl. That video made me want to move to New York, wear some sweatpants and some story, and that's for another time. I really appreciated this this series because it was some things that I found out that I didn't know, some things that they reminded me of that I have how important it was, and I think that it brought up a lot of things, and I like the diverse viewpoints of it, right. And I think that that was really important. But I was comfortable watching it. I even recommended to my girls. I said that we would sit down and take a look at it because I think it's important.
Nozibele, do me a favor and hang up and come right back because your thing is like kind of grainy for some reason. But I think if you like go out and come back, maybe it'll fix it because it's you were going in and out. Like go off the like completely hang up and then come back. But go ahead, Estee. What were you gonna say?
So yes, I too was calling it the pleasure principle. But of course I have a high level of comfort with the subject matter, a high level of comfort with the imagery, with the conversation. I was really impressed by how balanced it was. For it to be Netflix, I was very surprised by how balanced it was. I felt like we got a good representation of different types of sexual interaction. I think we got a good representation of bodies, a good representation of age, a good representation of experience. And I felt like we also got a good representation of science and praxis. So it just felt really. I think everybody should watch it that identifies as a woman or a femme. I really, really think it gives you a good, well-rounded perspective to think about things differently in ways that we don't necessarily talk about in our even in our girlfriend or safe space conversations. So I had a really good reaction to all of it. I loved it. I watched it twice, but it's my thing. So I'm biased.
I'm always struck by. I always get concerned in a variety of areas, not just this issue, but a variety of issues of how it's like, how do we stop reinventing the wheel? And it's always interesting to me, the numbers of women who don't know their bodies, who don't understand how their bodies work, and they just don't know. And so a series like this, of course, is very, very helpful, unfortunately, because there's still these, I don't know if generation is the right word, but groupings of women my age and younger who they just don't know their bodies. And I'm like, really? We have, of course we're not going to get it from the American educational system, but there are just so many supplements that are available either through social media, either through books, through films, etc. And we're still behind. There's still people who aren't getting it. I just always find that interesting.
Yeah, I think to piggyback on what you're saying, for me, that wondering is also around the pleasure gap, right? Like that there are so many of us that, don't experience the amount of pleasure that I think is our birthright, is what we are entitled to. Whether that is coming from however we choose to engage, but to actually ensure that we experience pleasure, I think is a really important part of the human experience. Our bodies were divinely created for it. And so I think that's always interesting to me. Because on a basic level, I just feel like I'm not living like that.
Well, I shaded that.
That's not your ministry.
I'm not gonna be able to do it. I'm not gonna be able to do it. You not. If we can't get a few things in order, then we not gonna be in working order. You know what I'm saying? It's not.
I stated that.
Yeah, I don't. That's. I don't understand that.
Okay, so Jamila, answer the question. Like, what your thoughts are, and how comfortable were you with the series, and then how comfortable are you having this conversation in general? That was what we were starting out with.
Okay, you're gonna have to give me the questions one at a time. You know, like, I don't know if my attention span got shorter because spring came. I don't know, but you know, I'm having issues over here. Okay, so the first one was what was the first question?
Just basically, how comfortable are you having this conversation? That's the question.
I think I would say a 7. And I would say subtracting the 3 points, 7 out of 10 is all because I didn't want my mom to call me and say, you embarrassed the whole family. And the church community, excuse me.
When the last time you've been to church?
That's neither here nor there. When's the last time that I communicated with people like my Sunday school teacher? Like maybe 2 weeks ago, we talk on Facebook, okay? Sister Kathy might see this because you posted on Facebook, and I don't want Sister Kathy to judge me. I don't care if I haven't been a member of the church for maybe decades. So that was my major discomfort. And I was like, yeah, mom probably won't watch. So considering my mom won't watch, I'm probably at a 9. Yeah. And so what was the second question? I'm very clear about this.
No, that's real. Like, I'm laughing, but I'm laughing because the laugh is like, that is real. I need.
Oh yeah, like that. Yeah. I'm laughing because I'm like, at this point, my family is just thoroughly embarrassed, right? So they're just like, and they call me by my middle name, so they're just like, Nena, she just don't care, like that's. So they just. There's just
gonna be Nena.
Right. There's just a base level of embarrassment.
Base level of embarrassment.
It's a base level of embarrassment across the board at the church, in the community. So I'm laughing because I absolutely identify.
No, and I was just thinking about that because I talk to my aunt like at least every other Sunday. I talk to her on the phone, and she has a Facebook account, but she doesn't get on it. But I was laughing because if I shared that, and my aunt did get on, and she's not a religious person at all. She don't go to church or anything like that. But if I was sharing it on my page and my aunt was active on Facebook, then I was laughing because I would be like, I would hide it for her. When I talk to her, I don't say, I tell her about all kinds of books that I read and stuff I watch. I ain't said, hey, did you watch The Principles of Pleasure? Didn't say it. Didn't have that conversation with her.
Right, because it's like, the answer already too. So there's that part. Yeah. So, and I was thinking while you all were talking, am I uncomfortable with my daughters watching it? They're, both in their 20s, mid-20s. No. Just mom. And the embarrassment I might bring on the family in the church. Yeah.
And that's even funny because like I'm used to, like, as a psychologist, particularly when I was doing therapy, I got used to like older clients that were like, my parents, grandparents' age talking to me about sex, even though it was kind of like, I just got kind of used to it. But even now, like if my aunt just says anything that is kind of remotely on the subject, then I've been trying to play it off and like steer the conversation in a different. I don't want to hear nothing. I don't want to know that you ever had sex like
I think it's funny because
Go ahead, Nozibele.
I was reading Pleasure Activism. I was reading Pleasure Activism, and it talked about your pleasure lineage, right? People who choose to respond and interact with. I started thinking about people in my family. Like, definitely my grandmother was really, she really participated in respectability politics, the church lady, you know, the real prim and proper. The way that she experienced and showed pleasure was by taking care of me. Right? But my great aunts, on the other hand, they were really raunchy, right? They love life. I remember my bump. She just had this wonderful laugh. She showed her teeth. And even though both her and my other great aunt Pat were married, they were very open about being attracted to and desiring other men, right? And they were very honest about other men desiring them, right? So they had very open and very just like casual conversations regarding sex. Where when he was in college, I told you all this story, and I have to tell you offline. He had this long beard that you know, he was wearing, you know, time everybody was into ancient Egyptian you know, culture, and he had like Pharaoh's beard. And when he came to my family, he met them for the very first time. They said raunchy about him and why he had that beard that was just like, oh my God, are you gonna say, you know, those things here? Jamila knows the story, and she knows what they asked him what that beard. But you know, it was really kind of cool. And he was like, and we were in the church.
Nozibele.
Women, very sexual thing on the table.
Nozibele, it's still hard to hear you. Look at the chat. I wrote in the.
Okay, I'm just trying to. Okay.
Yeah, it's with buffering and breaking up.
Okay.
Yeah, you keep
buffering.
I'm
go back out. I said this long thing.
We heard some of it, but it was like really broken up.
Yeah, but I can answer your second question while she's trying to come in. The second and third questions was how easy was it to watch the series, and
or how did you enjoy the series? Yeah.
Okay. So once when the announcement came out that this is what we would be discussing, and I went back and I started watching it. I'm saying back because when I started watching it, I was like, oh, I watched this whole first episode already. So why didn't it stick out in my mind? And why is it that I don't have the feeling that I want to binge watch this like other things? And I think it was uncomfortable for me. I had to first sit with the discomfort of like, you know how we talk about some of the difficulty of watching things that are about, you know, abuse of African and African descended people and stuff like this. And then the anger, the seething anger. I feel like my anger would come up when the statistics were shared, like the clitoris wasn't fully mapped until 2005, or hysteria. Yeah. And so I have to put stuff like that, like books like that, I have to sort of let them rest and come back to them. And I realized, you know, this says the principles of pleasure, and I'm watching it and I should be, you know, like getting pleasure, but in actuality, in a lot of ways, my historian's mind was engaged, in particular since I teach women's history. My historian's mind, it still was filing it like a lot of other things, frustrating aspects of living in a, you know, male-dominated, Eurocentric, you know, classist society, still gets engaged with that. And so it was not easy for me to watch, and I had to come back, and I will be continuing to, because I didn't finish the whole series, go back, and it's one of those things that I'm just gonna have to watch in parts, in pieces. Yeah.
You know what? I was just thinking, so it's interesting. I didn't have that experience of it, but I'm like, okay, so that's such a Spelman woman experience. Like that you just really were just like, wait a minute. That you were like clearly like thinking about it from that kind of womanist perspective, because I felt like I had it from a womanist perspective, but now that you're saying it, I'm like, yeah. But that stuff, I didn't have the same resonance. I wasn't thinking about it like just being pissed off. I was thinking it was crazy, but it didn't make me stop watching it.
Yeah. That is crazy. You put a man on the moon. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't have that reaction only because at this point I'm kind of anesthetized to it, but because of my engagement with the subject matter. But what I will say in addition to that is I really do experience, so part of my research, to give everybody context, part of my research started actually when I was at Spelman, because I was doing HIV/AIDS work, and when it got time for me to write my senior thesis, I just kind of noticed that there was this outlier when it came to Black women, right? So at that time, this would have been 2007-ish. At that time, Black women had the highest incidence and prevalence of HIV/AIDS. Now the numbers have shifted some. And now, oh my God, is that 20 years ago? 15 years ago. Sorry, I had a moment. But the numbers have shifted some. But so I got really enthralled with trying to figure this out. And where I landed in my research was around spirituality and religious formation. So for Black women, religious formation actually dictates our sexual behaviors more than any other variable, right? And at that time, people were just beginning to do some research around that, and it did kind of peak, and then I think funding shifted because of people being able to get undetectable and HIV vaccines and PrEP and things like that were still in clinical trial era around that time. And so there's not the same kind of industry drive around the research anymore. But that's how I got into this work. And so watching it, that's always the thing that I'm thinking about is while I loved how diverse it was, I loved how it felt very equitable, how it felt very much so like there was intention around who was included, what parts of the conversation were talked about. That's always the thing that I'm thinking about for our own folks. So for me, when we think about it from a Black perspective, you can't talk about sex and not talk about spiritual formation. And that's more than even just the church, because we get some interesting patriarchy around sex. And
even if you're not a churchgoer, we're in a society that is Christian, that is puritanical, that is Victorian. So it's going to be, our culture is going to be impacted by the overall culture.
Yeah. I mean, and I think I'm a good example of that. So, I've told y'all before, I was not raised in the church. Did not go to church. I mean, we went to church with our grandparents, when we would go to our grandparents' house, but that wasn't, regular. I was not raised in the church, and I still grew up with those ideas, those very puritanical ideas. And I remember like being 16 and my grandmother was talking about sex. And I mean, I like to have lost it. Even just the thought of my grandmother was a sexual being, because it had never crossed my mind before.
Yeah. So that's the thing that I probably would have added to the conversation, because I think that's true for Black women, and I think that's true for brown women. It shows up differently in white women and European descent women. It's there. Because certainly if you think about phenomena like Hillsong and things like that, there's a lot of sexual abuse that happens in both theological formation and in reality. So I'm not saying that it's absent for other groups, but it shows up with a different level of disparity and a different level of implication around behavior for Black and brown women.
One of the things that I really liked about the series, I mean, I was excited because I watched it last year. So for this talk, I watched it a second time, is I like what you said, Thandi, at the beginning, is that there was a variety of bodies. I love the fact that even like on the Netflix poster, it's a Black woman who is not a size, not a 0 or 2. She's probably an 18 or a 20 on there. So just having a conversation that all women deserve to have pleasure regardless of, you know, the color of their skin or the shape of their body, I thought was amazing. And then I thought it was amazing just to have women of different ethnic backgrounds. So you got, you know, old Black women, old white women, you know, young Asian women. I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
And even though I'm black coffee, no sugar, no cream, I did feel like it was not a token representation of different women. So I give them kudos for that.
It's interesting that you brought up Spelman, Ifetayo, and Estee, Reverend Estee. That was in my mind. So I was trying to think. I cannot recall having sex education, and I would have to do research and like look at the curricula in Birmingham city schools when I was, you know, growing up as to whether we had it. All I can recall is a friend's mother giving us pamphlets when I was in middle school and saying, you need to know this. Just, you know, keep it private, put it in your book, and you really know that. Like, that's the only really like growing up foundational direct, you know, these are the body parts and all that kind of stuff. Then shout out to Latasha's mother from middle school. You know, that's the only thing I remember before getting to Spelman. And it was at Spelman where I learned a lot of just, you know, direct. I was exposed to a lot of direct talk about sex, sexuality, pleasure, anatomy, as much as they knew, because I'm still not over that the clitoris wasn't fully mapped until 2005. I'll get over it one day, but right now.
No. It wasn't 2005. It was 15 or 16. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Worse than you thought.
Yeah.
No. It's registering with me as 2005 too. 2015.
Yeah, I think she said 2005.
15 or 16. It was a few years ago, not even 10 years ago.
Maybe that was when that made us black out. That's why we just heard the 5. We just heard the 5 part.
Yeah,
you all didn't have like the rudimentary sex education and health class.
Oh, maybe I just don't recall.
I sure don't remember.
Yeah, that's why I said I remember it. Yeah, I would have to research it.
Yeah,
it is 2005. 2005. It's 2005.
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember it in health class, and I remember at that point they separated the classes. And then the women would go with the women and they would talk about quote unquote lady things. And the guys would, you know, go with the guys. And then we would come back after we had those conversations. I know in school now they have sex education and you have to sign a form if you want your child to participate in the conversation. And if you don't, they have the option to stay home that day or to like not go to that class altogether. And another thing, my mom actually worked for Planned Parenthood when I was younger. So because she worked for Planned Parenthood, we always had those, you know, condoms that my brother used to take and sell to the boys in the neighborhood because he was all about making money. Or either the phone that she used to bring home because she was supposed to go to different places to talk to people about it. Couldn't figure out why all those things were missing. And she, of course, had pamphlets that she used to talk about.
I didn't know your mom worked for Planned Parenthood. Wow.
Yeah, for a hot minute.
We had a class in the 7th grade. I remember it was the only, I think our teacher was Asian. He was a non-white teacher. I can kind of slightly see him now, but I'm pretty sure he was a man of Asian ancestry. And I remember my 7th grade mind thinking he was very uncomfortable. talking about it. I think we were all in the class together, and he said some generic things really quickly and then just moved on. And that's all I ever got.
So my parents had a sex talk with me when around my menses, and I did not know they were talking about sex until I was a senior in high school. So it took me like 8 years to be like, and then I had to go back and be like, wait, was y'all talking about sex? Right? They never said vagina, penis, intercourse, sex. They didn't say any of those 4 words. So it was very like, you have private parts and your body's going to change, and if somebody touches you and you don't want to be touched, you come and tell us and let us know. So like, God bless them, they did their best. But as a kid, you know what I'm saying? Like, I went through puberty early, you know what I'm saying? Like, I've been wearing a bra since I was 8. I had big feet. Like, I was just that child. So I was like 9, you know what I mean? It was right before my 10th birthday when I had Missy. So I was just like ready to go to sleep. Like, I remember the conversation, and I remember sitting on the edge of the bed and being like, I really would like to go to sleep. Right. So I had no concept of like what they were really talking about. And so they passed me this book that literally was like this thick, but I love to read. I've always been, you know, that person. And so they gave me the book and I read it, but the book was very scientific. Which I'm that person too. So it made sense to me. I understood, right? So I understood what they gave me, but I didn't have the tools as a child to connect that science to practical behavior. Like there was, I didn't, so I could tell you all about the gestational process and what was going on with a fetus at, 16 weeks, but I had no idea about like how that translated to my body. I didn't even understand that I could get pregnant at that. Like I had none of those connections. And so that was my experience at home. And at school, we had sex education during PE. So they split us up by gender. And I remember Coach Hopes, who I really think was supposed to be a lesbian or was one and was hiding. She like demonstrated using condom on a banana. And I just remember feeling like you ever been around a person and it's like, they embarrassed, but you don't feel embarrassed for them. Like they're not doing anything embarrassing to you, but you can tell that they feel embarrassed, and you like, it's really not necessary. Like that was how I felt. I was in class like, what is this? What am I supposed to do with this? And I was like 7th or 8th grade, and we all kind of just stood there and looked at her, and it probably lasted one period. So what's that, 90 minutes, so we did like watch a video or whatever, and they showed us all these horrible STD pictures and like that kind of thing. And so I, spiritual formation wise, I had a pastor who every single Sunday stood in the pulpit and said premarital sex is wrong. Now he could have been talking about Noah getting all the animals on the ark in the sermon, but some kind of way every Sunday we was gonna land on, and you can't be having no premarital sex, right? So I got these really, really strong messages about not doing it, but I didn't get anything else. Right?
You didn't get the story of what it was.
Exactly. And to y'all's point, now I'm going down from a 10 to a 9. I can say this because I know my mom may watch it, and it was too late. When I figured it out, I was already screwing. So at 17, it was too late. I was like, oh.
Okay.
I remember the most. This is one of my close friends when I was in high school, and she was the only person I knew that went to church. That came from an extremely religious family. For us, extremely religious because we're not in the South. So somebody going to church every Sunday, going to Bible study and all that stuff, that was extremely religious. And family was very strict. You couldn't go anywhere that wasn't a church activity. So I won't say her name, but baby girl ended up getting pregnant on a church trip and didn't know who the father was because she had slept with 2 different people on a church trip. And that was my senior year in high school. And I just remember, or it might have been junior year. I think it was my junior year. And that had such an impact on me, you know, like coming from this background where religion wasn't beat over my head, but there was still all these kind of, you know, patriarchal messages about sex and, you know, sexuality and stuff like that. And watching this person where, you know, she couldn't necessarily go out with me on a weekend thing, and because we're not part of the church, but she's the one that ends up pregnant
by church members
on
a church outing,
and don't know who the daddy is because
which I don't know if the series went into that, but I know we of course can talk about it from our own experience being socialized living here in the US. These spaces and places that are so repressive that will, you know, they end up having the opposite desired effect.
Yeah.
Because of this, it's just not healthy. This repression is not healthy at all. It's just not.
Estee, go, and then I want to tell y'all. So remind me to tell y'all a story about repression. Say repression and internship in my internship, and I'm gonna tell you another story.
Well, my reaction was that I had a lot of sexual exploration in church settings.
Oh Lord, help us, Lord.
But again,
help us, Lord.
Watching, so.
Pray for us, Lord.
But it's true because I had that parent, right? Like my daddy wouldn't let me go to the church function in the van with everybody else because he didn't trust the people that was in the van. You know what I'm saying? Like it was that kind of you know, hyper awareness of what my social interactions were. That was my lived experience. But I think the point really is around this conversation around pleasure and sexual exploration. You know, like as Black folks, are we really having the conversation and talking about tools and ways that we give children space to explore pleasure,
in a healthy manner?
Yeah, and to explore sexually in healthy and safe environments, right? So just on a basic level, do our children feel like it's okay to masturbate? Do our children feel comfortable with touching their anatomy? Do our children feel comfortable with looking at and naming their anatomy, right? Like the number of grown people I know that are not male-bodied that ain't never took the time to like look in the mirror, to like lay on the floor and back up and
listen, hey, when you go to the doctor, look in the drawer, they got extra speculums. It's okay. That's how I did it.
I'm really concerned about your criminal activities.
I was going to say that you still a speculum.
I'm not stealing. See,
watching snowfall.
This is why
stealing speculums. I mean, what is going on?
When I share, this is why I have trust issues. You better go on and catch some of them plastic disposable extra speculums and take them home and find you a mirror. You better go ahead.
I mean, but really, like a very clear, you know, message that I got from lots of different experiences that could be its own episode with just talking about bodies.
Mm-hmm.
A very clear message that I got verbally and by behavior was not to touch myself or look at myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
You know what I'm saying? And so how then am I supposed to explore? How am I supposed to understand pleasure? And so I feel like, you know, we kind of set ourselves up for either repression or ignorance or abuse or hypersexuality.
Because we're not supposed to be doing it. That's the message. We're not supposed to be doing that.
Yeah.
Right.
We're not supposed to be doing that.
That's the whole thing in feminist sexuality about why women aren't taught the different parts of their bodies, while we're not taught to explore and why we are socialized to view those parts of our bodies as dirty and disgusting and all of these types of things. Because if we reclaim our body parts, if we look at it and if we love it and fall in love with it and become knowledgeable about it, there's a certain power in that. Like Audre Lorde is saying, like Bell Hooks is saying, there's power in the erotic, there's power in pleasure, there's power in claiming our bodies for ourselves, you know, and experience that pleasure, you know, for ourselves and with ourselves, so that we can understand that and be able to share it and explore it with someone else. Because you don't know those things if you can't explore it with yourself first.
The other dimension for me, though, I feel like I got a certain level of education going to a Black women's college. But in terms of like the specifics, things like, have you looked at your, vulva in a mirror, right? Do you know the body parts? I got through my women's rites of passage program because Nozibele and I both are in Osset and African sisterhood, which is, the sisterhood that you get as a result of completing the rite of passage. And that was a part of it. And I think the most frank and even fraught conversations that I've had about women and women's sexuality in all its, all across the spectrum, it is through Osset and with Osset sisters who we didn't always agree in terms of what should and could be said within our circle and publicly, but the most real talk was there.
And I don't think, when I think about it, I don't think that I ever had a space like that, because I never went through a rites of passage program where there was just like authentic, real talk. I think for myself, I just kind of bumbled along and discovered stuff, on my own. I do remember, actually, let me give credit, because nobody ever said anything, but you remember the okay, Estee, you don't, but everybody else, the 1970s version of Our Bodies, Ourselves.
Oh, I've seen that. I'm a good feminist. Don't do me like that.
No. I'm saying the 1970s version. They got new, because
but
I had one with my girls. Oh, you remember to say, okay. Yeah. So I remember, I think it had a green cover, and that was always in my house. And so growing up, people weren't comfortable. The adults in the household weren't necessarily comfortable talking to me, but that book was there. It was prominent, and I was always allowed to pull the book off the shelf, and I could go through it. So that was really kind of my first introduction to anything in terms of women's bodies and women's sexuality, is reading that book. And it had such an impression on me that, I always kept up with the updated one and kept one in my house because of that. I mean, I even remember there was like this picture that used to be there. I think they took it out in the more recent versions of, this is before Roe v. Wade. There was a picture of a woman that was laying on the ground dead from an illegal abortion. So that's like a prominent picture there, and that's like burned in my brain from being a kid and seeing that, and just, so that was kind of my first engagement. But I don't remember ever having any consistent conversations with adult women that knew more than me, that were teaching me about my body. I had to kind of just get all the stuff, from learning in books. And so when I think about that, and just in terms of I think the video, I mean, several women were talking about that, and I was like, I can definitely relate to that experience. And what I found was interesting is, like, when I looked at the reviews, and people were saying all these negative things, obviously, about it. There was a lot of negativity about it, but one of the things was like, how could you not know that stuff? And that's ridiculous. Like, you wouldn't know that information. And I was like, well, how did I miss it? Because nobody told me this stuff growing up. Nobody told me. I mean, I find myself, even now, there are like certain books that I will get. Like, I like Esther Perel's books on mating in captivity. I love her stuff because she specifically focuses on historically marginalized people that have history of oppression and looking at sexuality. I love her stuff. I love, there's another one that I used to have my clients read. I read with my clients called Good Girl's Guide to Bad Girl Sex. I think that's what it's called. And that one was like a really good, it's kind of dated now, but that was a really good one to talk to clients with. And those are the things that actually I learned along the way. So like either I was teaching myself, or then as I was becoming a therapist, I had to learn more in order to be able to teach my clients. But all of that was through self-study.
Which would kind of be my question to us. And you don't have to disclose personal information more than you feel comfortable with. But I'm interested to know, what has everybody's journey to affirming and ensuring pleasure, physical, sexual pleasure in your life? What has that journey been like from where we started and what we were given to where we are now?
It is ongoing, and I can say that for myself.
Especially since we're changing. So it's not just, that's what I was thinking about a lot. It's not just that we had certain, experiences, social experiences around sex, sexuality, and pleasure in certain contexts, the context of our faith institutions and our families and all this kind of stuff. But then times are changing, so what we know is changing. That was another, I don't know if I was clear about that before. Another part of what was not the easiest for me in terms of getting through the series is like, I thought I knew something. I was learning stuff in 1991, and now stuff changed because people discovered stuff. This is another thing to make me feel old. So the information, the knowledge that we have is changing. And then I'm in transition and changing all the time too. So, in 1991, I was at a different stage of development. And, every day my husband can tell you, or my partner can tell you, I'm like, yeah, that's because of menopause. Yeah, I forgot that, because perimenopause. I don't have no proof that I'm in perimenopause or anything like that. But, it's just like, I am still, I have to admit it, a middle-aged woman, right? And so my relationship with my pleasure, my body is changing, I feel like, on a daily basis. And I was going to ask y'all that. I don't want to take over your question, but after this, can we talk about whether, I didn't get through the whole series, so did they give advice to people who old and be tired when they come home, when they can finally
be quiet? Time out. Go the time out.
No, this is a real question, because I'm like, all this theorizing and stuff, I just get too tired to even get into it by the time I get home. So what's the advice for us at that age?
I think they talked about it a little bit toward the end of the series. I don't know if you saw that part, and they mentioned how that sex isn't just one thing. It's a combination of several things. And I think they said the mind, the body, where your body may be excited, but your mind isn't, right? Because you're thinking about all the stuff that you have to do.
Your body is willing.
Yeah, your body's willing, but your mind is, the sex part of your body is willing, but your mind and, and your physical body be like, man, I'm tired, and you want to do this too. So they talked about different ways that you can try to integrate those three things so that you can be more sexually aware. And definitely they say have conversations with your partner, because if I'm remembering correctly from the video, they talked about how men respond differently to sex, right? So you're folding clothes and you think, I have to fold these clothes and I have to go and finish writing what I need to write. And he comes in and he touches on your butt and he was like, okay, so it's about to be on. It's not like that for women, right? So they talked about how you need to communicate with your partner about, look, I'm not feeling this right now. Help me with the clothes and help me with this. And then maybe that will sexually arouse me, seeing you fold in the clothes.
And then we'll both be too tired.
But it solves your problem, then you don't have to do it.
I saw I'm doing, and Jamila said to put the books in that I was rattling off. So I'm trying to put those in. And it doesn't look like they have a newest version. You guys can have to look for Our Bodies Ourselves. I don't see anything since 2011. So, but I do see the 1970s version. So I was right. It was like a gray, black and white, gray, and it had like green on there. So I do remember that from childhood. It was published in 1976. For me, I think it has been a very interesting journey from being conservative, being confused, confused in the sense that I'm figuring this stuff out on my own and not necessarily having someone that I felt comfortable talking to. Even with Nozibele and Njabile, I've known them for a long time, and my conversation with them is not necessarily sex talk conversation. I think in the more recent years, I've said a couple of things to Njabile where she's just like, I don't want to know. But even when I'm saying those things, I'm saying them more, I think, more, not in a conversation, in an exploratory conversation. It's more like a backhanded comment about somebody in particular, which is not. So, Estee, I guess, Estee, you've heard me say that too. So, I got my little backhand comments about people, but not necessarily. Like, are we having a real conversation of like, what does pleasure look like? And at this point, for those of us that are, over that 50 hump, then what will menopause look like? And my mother is deceased, so I don't have the ability to talk to her about what that looks like. But one of the things that I've noticed about myself, and I think this is full circle for me, as I'll say this and then I'll stop, is when I was younger, like in 19, early 20s, in that era, I was very much a cutesy girl and dressing up. And for those that are Ifa practitioners, they'll understand this, that Oshun part of me was very much coming out in how I presented myself. And then I got around these Black nationalist folks around here, and that I was criticized for being the cutesy girl that wanted to dress up and just kind of having that kind of Oshuni, peacocky kind of energy, that coquettish energy. And so I very much downplayed that, and particularly as I was raising my daughters. And I have found myself going back to who I have always been the older that I get. And so I might be the person that, has something low cut on, or that is going to hug my body, and I'm going to be dressed up. And that is just because that is who I am. That's how I feel most comfortable presenting myself, and not in a necessarily ostentatious way, but just, I like being a pretty girl. And I am just now getting to the point where I feel comfortable, and I don't feel like I have to be apologetic about that. Like, I can be a nationalist, be a Pan-Africanist, I can be a womanist, but also when I come to the event, I'm probably going to have one of the flyest outfits on. At least from my perspective, and I'm not going to apologize. And it's probably going to be form-fitting, and I'm not going to be apologetic about that.
I think we need to do an episode on that lies we were told as we came into Black nationalism as women, because like you being in it, there was a lot of suppression. There was a lot of criticism. There was a lot of things that I think was, for the most part, damaging when I look back at it now.
Absolutely.
I think it kind of stunted. Women don't wear jeans, right? You're always supposed to be in a bust-up lapa. You're always supposed to do that. And it was very, very concerned about my sexuality and how I expressed myself, down to the point of criticizing my physicality, right? Being built as tall and slender, somehow that was my fault that I had hot and dry energy of a man, right? And the fact that I have, that Ogun energy in my family and I come across that way, criticized by not being sweet enough, because of course, no man is going to want someone who's fiery. So if you are told that, then you are going back to start thinking that not only do you have to subvert who you are publicly, but privately as well. I can't be demanding in sex, right? I can't be open about what I want, because that's being aggressive. That's being seen as someone who is masculine presenting and not falling into the roles of who I need to be as a woman. So those are, I mean, that's when I think about it now, like you said, having to relearn who I am. And that also includes relearning what gives me pleasure and what makes me happy in that regard.
Nah, Shay. I have a sister / elder named Makani Tamba. Hey, Makani, if you're looking. I remember she wrote an essay once, and she started off talking about how so much of Black nationalism is reminiscent of Ozzie and Harriet. I was like, ooh, don't let them hear you say that. But yeah, I mean, puritanical Victorian mores and ideals have invaded revolutionary Black nationalism. But that's another story for another day.
Yeah, so you're actually making me think, Tonda, you and Nozibele are making me think, because I can't tell you the number of times that, and this comes, the conversation is different from men and women. I didn't realize that I had an hourglass shape until one of my women friends pointed that out. And it was slightly as a backhand comment. Oh, you in that hourglass shape. Oh, you've been dressing that hourglass for a long time. And then I happened to stand in the mirror and I was like, oh, okay. And then, people making comments about, oh, I never seen you with the same outfit on before. Oh, so you don't wear jeans, huh? Oh, you always dressed up. And the comments it would seem like a compliment, but it was always one of those kind of backhand compliments towards me. And it wasn't until other people started saying stuff to me that I really got oh, okay. And those would be almost like the women comments. The men comments would constantly be, and it's a whole other conversation we don't even need to have right now, but where I comment that I get to fit into someone's idea of a Black Barbie doll.
Oh yeah.
And so then there's that constantly that conversation. So the male conversation is something around that Barbie doll image.
And so for feminist sexuality, one of the things that they suggest is that we should start critiquing and evaluating men's bodies the way that they do ours, right? So bodies have different seasons, and you can put that out there. You can say, oh, I like a man with broad shoulders and a slender waist. This is what is attractive to me, and definitely voice those things so that they can know, because we're constantly being evaluated. Either you're too tall, you're too big, you have this realistic body type. And as they said in the documentary, only those body types, only those ethnicities are deserving of pleasure, right? Yeah. And even though the series did a great job showing a whole, diverse cast of people, the real reality when you look at, society is that, you can only deserve love, fame, sex if you are a certain age, certain ethnicity, and certain body type. Everyone else gets, left out of the mix. And even though people say, oh, you're tall and skinny, that's a good thing. But let me tell you, growing up in African-American community, that did not work for me. That did not work for me, being small boobed, small waisted, small hips. That I was left out of a lot of conversations in terms of, you know, who is quote unquote bangable and who's not, because I didn't have the bathonkathonk in the trunk. I got it now, though. I got it now.
So this is making me realize, or you can tell me, do I need to go back and watch the series? I'm still on my journey because now I have to navigate disability and how that works. So I don't know if the disability was addressed. I don't remember it in the first part. If it was addressed in the third part, I didn't get to the third episode. 3.
It was addressed, but I won't say that I felt like it was. I felt like they were trying to be equitable, but I don't know if it was as thorough as like maybe the section on the brain or the mind. You know, it wasn't as long as that, but it was addressed.
Well, I'm glad you brought up pleasure activism, Adrienne Marie Brown. I haven't read it yet, but I know we're talking about the Netflix video series, but stuff that we can supplement. On Instagram, I follow a page called Afro Sexology. That might be all you need if you're looking for something. They talk about it all. I mean, you know, and it's educational and it's helpful. So Afro Sexology on Instagram is a good resource also.
Is it at Afro Sexology?
Afro Sexology, and it's AFRO. I'm
yeah, it's literally one word.
Yeah, I'm not sure why I'm saying APHRO, but AFRO Sexology. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm putting in everything that we said.
Are you putting it in the comments or in the chat?
I'm putting it in the comments.
Okay.
Yeah. The one book that I just put in is The Body Is Not an Apology. That one specifically, I don't know if y'all have heard of that one, that specifically talks about, you know, disability. And
is that a sister who wrote that?
It is. Yeah. I do think that I didn't finish it just because, you know, I'm a queen of an audiobook. So I'm constantly listening. I didn't finish it just because I think it's good, but it's not as mature, if you will. Some of the concepts felt a little bit basic for me, but I do think I think the book does a better job of addressing the rights of women, regardless of what your body looks like, the abilities or disabilities that you have, and your right to access pleasure. So,
yeah, I think these are important conversations. And I think the series presents a whole lot for us to unpack, but I hope we'll have maybe some more focused discussions about different aspects of pleasure, particularly pleasure for Black women. And then not just Black, but, you know, of all in an intersectional conversations, because it was actually very helpful for me, Thandi, and I appreciate and thank you for bringing up disability. And I was typing in the private chat, but, you know, I wanted to say publicly, because I think, like you all are saying, it's sometimes helpful to be, you know, you don't have to just read it, right? Reading it is one thing, or watching TV in isolation is one thing, but having a conversation in a safe space with people who might be going through something that you're going through and put words to it that you didn't have is really important. Because I said, oh, I'm tired. But when you said disability, I was like, wait a minute, like, so I'm calling everything tired, but sometimes my knees are hurting. And so that it's not my 1991 or 2001 self is not showing up, you know, the way I have to show up in my body now and still be a whole person. That means experiencing pleasure, right? And so, yeah, it was well and good to talk about how, you know, we've come a long way in terms of understanding feminine anatomy, female anatomy, but like, okay, you know, when your body is changing and you do have things, or even if you've lived with disability since birth, right? then how does that affect pleasure and how you experience it, how you seek it, you know, how you self-pleasure, all that kind of stuff. Those are really important questions to have.
Yeah, I think that, and I know we do need to begin to wrap up, so if we can start to begin to think about final comments. The back, I put it on there, the Good Girl Guide to Bad Girl Sex, and I just saw that they have actually the audio book. The actual hard copy book is, like I said, it's dated, so some of the concepts are dated. In the back of the book, it's the book that I know of. Estee, you may know something else that you can offer us. There's lots of good exercises for exploring your body and what brings you to orgasm and just exploring pleasure in your body. And I would walk women through those, not like in the session, obviously, but we would talk about that and have them go and try in a safe place at home by themselves. So
them folk come away from Dr. Ojelade. This place is lit, boy. Woo, wait. You got to try her.
Got all kinds of stuff going on in there. But I think that that's a good place to start in terms of just your self-exploration about pleasure for your body. If you don't know any place else, like I said, go to the back of her book, all of her exercises. And the thing that we didn't talk about at all, we just don't have time to talk about, is how trauma impacts sexuality and pleasure. So let's begin to wrap up. Oh, let me tell y'all the little quick thing, because remember I told y'all I gotta tell y'all about my other little thing. So I never looked this up, but I know when I was finishing my internship, Macon County, Alabama, and so I'm with a group of psychologists, and one of the things that they were pointing out to us, in that county of Alabama, they have the largest, very religious. So the only thing, I mean, you either Christian or you're not there.
It's either of God or it's of the devil. Them the options.
And I thought it was so interesting that it was such a religious county, but it was also the county where they were telling us, and this is because we were treating clients, that it was the largest, they had the biggest problem with bestiality in the entire country. I'm going to spare you the details.
Did not expect that.
Yes, I didn't either. I was thinking,
STD, pregnancy, AIDS. Yeah.
I even thought incest.
Yeah, I mean, I went there.
You wasn't expecting that one, was you?
No, that one caught me by surprise.
The stuff that I shouldn't even said it, because now my brain is like going back in those stories, because I wouldn't even tell y'all like the stuff that was being told to, like, so one of the people that was on internship with me was actually working with the client. And when I tell you, if people don't have a way to explore their sexual selves, that they're going to act out.
They're going to find one. Yeah, you don't have to tell. Thank you. No thanks. No, thank you. You can keep that to yourself. You can hold on to that one.
But that kind of ties in with and I know we have to go. And I keep being quiet because I agree with Njamile. Like, I feel like there are at least 5 different major and maybe we can just do that. Pleasure activism has a lot in it. Maybe we can just kind of revisit some things. But I do want to just kind of put this on the floor too as we're closing. The other big component to our pleasure is our communication, right? Like, what kinds of conversations are we having with ourselves? What kinds of conversations are we having with our partners? What kinds of ways are we communicating, advocating, talking, and really kind of being clear about what we need, what's going on, what we know, what we don't know, what we could, and even having the space to be unsure, like how Jamila was saying, like, I'm calling everything tired, but sometimes I'm not sure what it is. It could be the clothes, it could be my knee pain, it could be something else, like it could just be being uninterested. It could, it could be several things. And I think that's a really important part of how we access pleasure, is our ability to communicate, and to increase our tools for communication if we don't have them, right? So, when I work with people, I actually ask them to go to books later. I try to get people in their body first, because I think a lot of times our ability to access our communication with ourselves, to have access to the communication with our own nerve endings, right? Like, are we paying attention to what it feels like when we put lotion on? Are we paying attention to what it feels like when we touch our inner thighs, when we touch the back of our knees, when we touch and caress ourselves lightly first, right? And what are the ways that we are allowing our brain, our body, our emotions, our psyche, and our sexual organs, our erotic zones, to be engaged and fully engaged as we are living in this beautiful thing that the Creator gave us. And so I think, so sometimes that looks like, okay, I got that part down, but I need to communicate with this person that's not doing what I need to do. And that you have a right to communicate and to advocate for what it is that you need, and creating space to be like, I don't know, or I do know, or I'm not sure, but I don't like that, or to try something that you haven't tried before, or to take the time to look and to understand your own anatomy, so that it's not just another person who has access to you in a way that you don't have access to yourself. So I don't know if that feels a little bit all over the place, but
no,
it wasn't. And it goes with what Adrienne Marie Brown talks about as radical honesty, right? And that radical honesty is that you have to, like you said, tell people, like, this feels good today, but it may not feel good tomorrow. Or I didn't like this yesterday, or but I may like it tomorrow. So just that radical honesty is the key to unlock everything. And it goes into what I wanted to say in terms of my final statement, what that Audre Lorde says is a part of a quote, that when we tap into the erotic and when we tap into our pleasure, it forces us to kind of give up on suffering and self-negation, because it will force us to love and take care of our bodies and claim it. So
I love it.
Sister
Thandi, Sister Jamila, last
It
word.
sounds like we're talking about Black joy and misery resistance. Resisting misery. Misery resistance. I believe
I like that.
Yeah, DJ Lene Denise, I believe she was the first one I heard use that. We resist misery. Misery resistant, Black joy and misery resistance, both together.
I think I said what I wanted to, which is that hopefully the conversation will continue and and really break down some of these topics.
Okay, well, there it is. I wish everybody great orgasms now and in the future.
Yes.
I mean, like weekend. Now while we're on,
hey, like, but I don't want to see that. Hey,
turn the camera off, sis. Turn the camera off.
Listen,
I can't see Tandy's hands.
Listen, one of the joys of working from home. Everybody at the house. Have a good Friday.
Well, I was trying not to tie that in. But that being said, Reverend,
a real good Friday. Okay.
Tony Chimurenga, Antoinette, Nozibele, Kaumba, Waithe, and Dr. Kenja McCray, thank you, ladies, for this conversation. I appreciate you.
We missed you, Corrie. Love all of y'all.
We missed you, Corrie. Yeah, Corrie wasn't feeling us today. No, I'm just playing. She had something to do.
I'm talking about my friend. She be busy.
So we'll see y'all next Friday. Thank you for watching, and please like and share. And I keep saying next Friday. We won't be next Friday. We'll see you the first Friday in May. Oh, and I actually will be gone, so somebody else is gonna have to leave. I'm going on vacation.
Yes, that's pleasure too.
There you go.
We all should go